Welcome, guys. The Co-op brothers, aka the Co-op family, is here. I am Mad Gamer, and I have Cloudy Chip. We got some good stuff to talk about today. We're going to be doing a full review of Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. There's a lot to talk about. I'll go second. I'm going to allow Cloudy to get off everything he feels or thinks. Just know there's going to be nothing but spoilers here from beginning to end. We don't want to hold back. We really feel necessary to just unload everything we have about it. You're going to be watching visuals from different boss fights, some of the story as well. I'll skip through different parts as we all talk. And I wanted to start off with Cloudy. So Cloudy,
what up, Mag?
chilling. I wanted to just hear your impressions. I didn't get to really hear anything yet fully. So I just want your impressions. If you had to give us a review in your own words on your experience with this game.
Well, I'm gonna start off hot and say that this probably should be game of the year, and trust me, we have so much to be revealed throughout the year, but I think this game is definitely top. If I had to give it a rating, it would probably be 9 out of 10. The only caveat I will say that threw me off about this game, and I'll get right into it, is going to be the fact that whenever I get into certain situations where I'm in a different spot of the map, it doesn't allow me to hit a button and be like, okay, let me spawn back to my last destination where I was just at, right? And sometimes that saves you a ton of time, especially in a game like this that's kind of like a Metroidvania game, where there's so many hidden areas, and sometimes you don't want to go through all that to get back to where you need to be. So sometimes it's easier just to kind of kill yourself and spawn back at the last place you had your checkpoint, right? And then you can kind of go from there. The problem with that is that one, it's kind of boring because anybody watching your walkthrough, they'll be like, oh, why is this guy trying to kill himself, right? Then what ends up happening is if you end up killing yourself, and then you end up losing all the abilities. So like as you start stacking your, I think it's called Atra, which is like your super gauge, you end up building up that super gauge, and then because you're fighting enemies as you're traversing the world, you end up losing all that, and you end up starting from scratch. So that would be like the only thing that I would say that was kind of disappointing. Was like, damn, like I wish they gave me a button to kind of spawn back at my location so I don't have to go through all this all over again, especially when you're kind of just exploring and kind of trying to, figure things out, right? Certain little crevices, certain little hidden passages, because the thing is a lot of them, while you're traversing the world, is you won't be able to get to them unless you unlock the certain abilities. And the thing is with Prince of Persia, you unlock them throughout your time with it as you're progressing through the story. So that's the only thing I would say that was probably like the biggest disappointment. That if I had to give a negative, that would probably be the only thing. Other than that, they had really good cutscenes. I think the design was at the beginning. I was like, when I first saw the trailers, I'm like, really? Like this is what we're doing? And I didn't have high hopes for the game, because me being a true Prince of Persia fan, like I really loved all the series as a whole. I didn't like the fact that they were going back to 2D. I really wanted 3D, but I love the fact that they actually went 2D, and because it opened up a whole new world, and I love the art style that they went with too. So that if I had to give my take on it, that would probably be the biggest thing, is that the game, it has so much to uncover. There's so many like hidden passages, so many things. Like as you're progressing through the story, you start unlocking all these abilities. It brings me back to Super Metroid from back in the days, and that was like one of the best games from way back in the day. So that's what I would say with that.
Got you. I will kind of counter what you're talking about just for everybody listening. There is fast travel and there is checkpoints with the trees. So you want to hit a tree and you'll end up, if you do die, you'll go there. But what Cloudy's talking about is the difficulty. This is something that the game is purposely trying to put you through, whether it's hard bosses, hard platforming, and then you might die and then you have to redo a whole area, and it can get frustrating, but that's a part of the design in the game. So I actually wouldn't, my personal take on that would be that I wouldn't get mad at that. That's just about, you know, the way they design Metroidvania style games. But definitely. And by the way, we're watching some of the very early first hour or two cutscenes, Cloudy. And I know you're a fighting game fan. I felt like this game made me want to play fighting games a little more. I'm gonna be honest. It's like, oh, I could do some crazy combos, have some amazing abilities to
Yeah.
really do something crazy. How did you feel about what I'm saying, but also just the boss fights?
So as far as fighting style, I feel like if you're very similar, like if you're good with like how would I say it? Smash Bros. If
Hmm.
anybody got a chance to ever put their hands on Smash Bros, it has a like that feel as far as like popping guys in the air, smacking guys down, doing all those little like nice movement. It's very free flowy, right? If that's even a word, but so it has that type of fighting technique to it, and which I love actually. So the gameplay as a whole, because of that, it stands up really well. So I like what they did with it. And then as far as the boss fights is concerned, amazing boss fights. I think like every boss fight that I've encountered, and it's a couple specific ones, the final boss, and then which will reveal. I don't know. Are you willing to reveal that, Mag, on this?
Of course. Why not? Well, we're going to go into one that you talked about earlier. Before that, her name is Kiana. We're going to watch some footage here.
Yeah.
And you were talking something that I agree with, and a lot more than just her. You know, if you're just before we talk about it, guys, we're kind of casually playing video games and we get used to our patterns, right? Up,
Mm-hmm.
up, down, smash. And this is what we'll do throughout the fights. And then all of a sudden you get into these boss fights, for me, where they challenge you and say, hey, you have to do something different, get creative, and use all your
Yeah.
abilities or something different. And I can go into depth about the amazing abilities to be able to change my build, and I have videos for that. But Cloudy, go ahead and talk about Kiana, and we're showcasing her right now and some of what she had, and give me your experience on that.
So Kiana was probably the boss that I was most impressed with. And the reason for it being is that as you're playing the boss, right? A lot of times you get boss fights where you're not challenged to actually use the abilities that you've acquired over your time playing, right? So with the boss Kiana, what that boss allowed any player to do was to say, you know what, we're gonna put you to the test. We're gonna see if you really mastered a lot of the abilities that we've given you and as you acquired over time, right? So, and the thing is, so you have arrows, you have the ability to take bombs, right? At this point, I don't think you have the ability at that point. Then what ends up happening, you have the ability to basically transport. So leave your body somewhere and then kind of keep fighting. And you can transport your body back to the beginning where you started, right? So it allows you to do all these things. And what happens is that the boss forces you to kind of play that style, to use your abilities to the maximum. Because if you don't, you're gonna take major damage. And then if you take major damage, and because it's so early in the game still, you're not gonna be able to survive that fight. So it forces you to say, you know what, damn, the only way I'm really able to beat this person is if I actually use everything I've learned, which is jumping, pressing, like jumping down really fast. It gives you the ability to kind of like speed your jump going down, right? It allows you to transport, allows you to shoot your arrows. There's bombs that get thrown on the map. You have to shoot them down. There's like so much that goes into it. And that's why this boss fight to me is probably the best, close to the final boss. And then mind you, and every boss fight challenges you in some way, but this boss fight particularly was the one that was like, wow, this thing is amazing, because it allows you, because right now, like as you guys are seeing, when the boss goes and throws that twirl thing, right? They're twirling their weapons. It forces you to use your parry, right? And that's another thing too. So it brings so many elements to the fighting, right, and into the gameplay, and it forces you to learn everything that you learned over your course of the game, right, as you're unlocking things. So that's what I would say.
Right?
That's one of my favorite boss fights right now.
Got you,
And I
got you.
feel
No,
like,
I can't.
and I honestly feel like kind of close it off, I feel like a lot of games nowadays they kind of somewhat lack that. And a lot of times you can kind of get away with kind of doing just normal things like, oh, let me parry, let me throw some, let me slash them up real quick, let me dodge real quick. But this thing, because this game has the ability to shoot down bombs, it has the ability to kind of leave your body in one place and transport. It has the ability for parry. It has the ability for all these things. It allows for the game to be more diverse in that aspect when it comes to gameplay. And I feel like some games, because they don't have all those crazy elements to it, a lot of the big titles especially, they don't force you to play it in any particular way. You kind of free flow and beat it as you please, right? But this kind of forces you to use what you've learned. And I feel like that was an amazing addition that they did with these bosses. And every boss in here is amazing in their own way. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I feel you on the bosses. And to kind of close out for bosses specifically, for me, I had a really good time. There were bosses like this gentleman right here, one of the main villains, who his
Volume.
speed was insane. I ended up changing my surge, which is your main abilities, to have the speed to be able to catch up to him and to go crazy he does. I end up doing it right back to him, and it was such a fun time for me testing out all these different abilities. I love RPG games that allow you to make different builds. Cloudy, and
Yep.
so making the best builds, because I'm a creative person. I'm an artist first, a gamer second, basically. And so as an artist, that felt really nice to have that. And as I talked to you guys about the amulets, I made some builds recommendations on one of my personal channels, talking about how you can change the way you play, making it fit your specific playstyle, or
Mhm.
fighting a boss specifically. So it's very cool stuff, really amazing stuff. I did want to take a moment before we go down the rabbit hole, Cloudy, to end this breakdown. I'm gonna jump right into platforming very quickly and see where your thoughts are as far as your experience. You've been playing games not as long as me, but pretty long, and this was one of the biggest type of video games in the past when it comes to platforming, and now I feel like it's back better than ever. Go ahead and break down what your thoughts on platforming.
So I played a lot of platforming. I played a good amount of platforming. And a lot of it comes from Nintendo, because I think Nintendo does a great job with platforming games. But I feel like this particular game took it to a whole new level with the fact that you're able to control the world and what appears and what doesn't appear. Like what you're seeing in this clip. You're able to one, use all your abilities to get around the platform. So you have to use your double jumps, you have to use your teleport, you have to use your there's this other teleport that you can do where you throw a boomerang, and the boomerang goes up in the air and you're able to teleport to it when you call yourself out to it. So it allows you to get around certain platforms, especially like this. Like you have a rope that goes ahead and you're able to grasp onto it and basically get to other areas that you normally wouldn't, right? So this challenges you in so many ways, and the platforming on this is amazing, because a lot of games, because they don't have the versatility with having all these type of powers and in their with the characters, it limits itself, and this kind of brings a lot of it to the forefront as far as like what platforming really is, right? This challenges you more than I think I've ever been challenged in the platforming space, because of all the elements that they give you, right? And everything that they throw at you. And then the thing is, you have to think outside the box a lot of the time too. So it's not just like, oh, let me just jump and see if I can get there. It's like, oh, let me jump, and what power do I got to use to get to that? And it's like, okay, if I use my power to get to that, then I can't touch the ground because there's spikes on the ground. So what other power do I have to actually use right now? It's not like, oh, it's not like I have to think like single-mindedly and say, okay, I just got to jump again, or I got to run in and jump. It's like, no, I got to run and jump, and then I have to throw the teleport, and then I have to throw this, then I have to try to grasp something and pull me in over there. And then when I get there, I have to use my double jump to get over that spike. And then I have to jump down really fast because there's boulders that are gonna come and squish me if I don't get down fast enough. And it's like, so all these things allow the game to be more versatile. And I like I said, and that's what makes the platforming so much more challenging. And I think this game introduces that in a really good way. And that's why I'm so happy with the way this game turned out, with the fact that I was disappointed at the fact it was 2D platforming, but they did it very well. And it's been a very long time that since I even seen anyone do it in this way. So that's why I'm calling it now game of the year, bro.
Whoa, everybody in the chat, let me know if you agree or disagree with that. That's a big statement. We're going to get into it because I haven't even gave my impressions.
Platforming. If we're talking platforming, I don't
Right.
see a Mario game knocking this off, unless you're talking about popularity. Because the thing is that if you're talking platforming, like this thing brings it to a whole new level, right? And Mario games, there's not that even. No, it doesn't matter if you're turning into a cat or you're getting big,
all the silly stuff,
or you're getting all these silly stuff to happen, right? It's not challenging you in no particular way where like this game challenges you as a player, right? So if you're looking for a challenge and you're looking for something that's platforming and that's really fun to play, this is where it's at.
I agree. I want to just jump in on that.
I'm saying this, someone who's played Mario games, someone who's played Metroid games, the Metroid platforming ones, especially the one I'm talking about, like the Super Metroids and stuff like that.
Right.
So you're talking about somebody who's played all those, right? There's nothing touching this at all.
Yeah, I will say, I'm going to get into my review in a minute. I will say that, but a teaser, I do have this in my top 5 all time when it comes to Metroidvania style games, which is something I didn't expect to feel or think. I thought it would be, Prince of Persia. Oh, I can't believe they didn't do 3D. I'll still try it out. That's where my head was.
Yeah.
And then after I finished it, top 5 easily for me. And Cloudy's, calling it game of the year, which it's only January for everybody that's watching this later on in the year. We'll come back in December and we'll make a decision on what's game of the year after all the great games that are coming. But let me jump in real quickly and talk about my experience, Cloudy. And you could, get in here in between and just make it into a discussion. So for me, this game hit on so many levels where it made me want to play fighting games and made me want to play Metroidvania games again more than ever. For those that don't know, I play over 100 games a year, well over 100 games a year, brand new games. Never mind the older games that I replay or try. So I spend a lot of time gaming. I don't do enough Metroidvania games lately. There's only a few that are like, oh, that's spectacular, I'll try it. And to kind of give you guys a quick breakdown, you got Metroid, you got Castlevania, Hollow Knight, Blasphemous, Dead Cell. You can put those in the top 5 more or less, but there's not many that come out that are spectacular in that way. And this game found a way to compete with the best of them somehow, in my experience. And I never thought I'll be that deep into it, and I'm gonna be replaying this at some point this year. I don't think they'll do a new game plus because these games usually don't have one, but we're gonna do something. And the point of what my take is that it really did convince me, that like, wow, you don't miss out on these Metroidvania games. Maybe there's be one that I don't think I'm interested in. I'm gonna try it just because this game was that good. It gave me a taste of greatness. So absolutely loved the game. The platforming definitely was challenging, the most challenging for me. I figured the bosses out mostly. It was the platforming that started to get to me where I'm like, man, I really need to get good. Yeah. And I respect what they did design-wise because it's incredible. And I talk about Prince of Persia 3D, but this was more challenging than any of those games that I could remember. And so I loved it. And, I'm addicted to it. I want a sequel. And we'll get into the last part right now, Cloudy. We'll let you jump back in, but I'm going to also kind of chime in with some of the story. And I'll introduce this beginning part here and talk about it. For me, the story, and see where Cloudy goes with it, but I love the main character. He is not the Prince of Persia that we knew from the past. He's a warrior protecting Persia, but it's a beautiful storyline of how things go and how he ends up saving or doing this or doing that. And of course, this is spoiler filled. So it's a powerful story about friends and scenarios, and how if you were in a time travel, you would want to do the right thing, but different versions of you will try over and over, and it can make you corrupted. And you end up fighting yourself in this game multiple times. And there's a storyline within that I liked, because it's kind of like reflecting on yourself, on your past doings or your future doings, and how you should stand true to yourself. And so it's a complicated thing. Even in this game, there was heartbreak of having to fight your own friends. And there were moments that if it was a CGI type of game where Last of Us, you're killing your friend, you're like, no, I don't want to fight you. And it becomes this very sad thing, but you can't see it because it is Metroidvania. So it takes away from the impact, in my opinion. But it's still an amazing accomplishment for them to be able to bring a story that was compelling. For me, it's all about the gameplay, but I love that big time. And there was so many things in here that I'll skip through, maybe somewhat closer to the end, literally the end. And he's like, I'll let you tell the truth to the queen who killed her king, her husband, trying to have all the power. And he basically says, no, I'm not going to help you continue to be corrupt, And so he's finding himself, and it's a beautiful discovery there that's special that I really liked. And overall, story-wise, decent as well. I also give it a 9, actually. It's just a spectacular game. But go ahead, Claudia, give me some breakdown on with the story. What was your experience?
So just to give you guys, Mag just gave you guys an overview of what the game is. So basically, just to kind of touch up on that, you got one of your friends, your mentor, basically. She captures the prince. She was corrupt, right? She was told something completely different. They needed royal blood, so she captures the prince. Your job is to get the prince back, but in the process of getting the prince back, Varum, who was your trainer, who was somebody who you looked up to, was like a brother to you, ends up betraying and killing the prince. He ends up becoming your biggest threat. So then basically you end up falling off a bridge. You end up getting into this world called Mount Koff, I think is what it's called. And now you're in this world. Mount Koff, right? So now you're in this world where you're finding yourself and you're finding your purpose. You start finding other versions of yourself in this world. You start going into the past. You find Vernon, I think his name is the guy who betrays you, right? Who kills the prince. You find him as a young boy, and you find out his storyline, what happened with his family and his dad, and he's actually the royal blood, not the prince that you were trying to save. And and then you find out all these things, all this corruption that was happening just to be able to, for his wife to be able to take the throne, right? So all this stuff happens. Then you got this young boy who holds that in for 30 years. The guy's 30, I think he's 32, 37, something like that. And he held that in for 30 years as a young boy throughout all that time, to be able to basically come back and try to fulfill his father's destiny, the king who was dethroned maliciously, right? But then in the process of that, he convinces your friends, who were so-called your friends, to believe the fact that you were the one that killed the prince, that you were the one that betrayed. And because of that, you end up fighting. Not all of them. One of them believes that you are a good person and that you would never do that. But other than that one person, all your other friends, you've had to combat, right? So you've had to sit there and face off with them and take them out. So they become boss battles that you fight along the way. And towards the very end, where you fight Vernon for, I believe, the second or third time. I forget how many times we fought him. Once on the bridge, and then the last one, that's the two that I can remember. And so you end up facing off with him again, and then you end up realizing that the prince, once he's saved towards the very end, he puts his crown down, saying, because he doesn't believe in his mother, right? He's like, oh, you failed us because you lied this whole time. Like, I'm not even meant to be king or meant to be the prince. So he puts down his crown, and then Sargon, which is the main character that you play, he ends up being the one that is revealed. He ends up finding all this out. He's the one that everything's revealed to, right? So he finds out all the truth, and he ends up walking away and basically tells the whole Persia, all of Persia, that she's a fraud. She lied. She was the one that killed the king to get her way. And he walks away with his head high and with honor, right? Because he tried to, and then and then the funny thing is that the queen says, oh, it was a small price to pay, which, and he's talking about, I faced off all my friends, all of the immortals. I had to do away with them. I sat there and they were the sacrifice into saving Persia. All because of your lies, all because of your deceit. And all she has to say was a small price to pay, which is like the most disrespectful thing you could say to someone who just put blood on their sword and the blood on the sword was from his friends, his family, basically. And that's all you got to say. And it was very, I felt that, like, it was like one of probably the most powerful scenes in the whole game was that ending and how it ended. And so that's what I would say about the story.
You just explained the whole story, dude. But you didn't say how you felt about it.
I gave you a quick breakdown of the story, but at the end of the day, I would say that the story as a whole was very well done. I love the way that they went about it, as far as how they introduced them, how the betray happened. All of it was very well done. And on top of it too, they didn't overwhelm me with just dialogue, right? They actually have really good cutscenes in it. You had some dialogue you had to get through when you were playing the story. And the good thing about it, for anybody hearing right now, is that, is actually the fact that they actually have voiceovers on those dialogues, which make it a little bit more personal. It's better than just having to have dialogue that you have to read yourself. It's actually dialogue that's played out and you have voiceovers over it, and it just makes it that much more compelling, right? And I think it was well done. I think it was well balanced. I don't know, at the beginning of the game, I'm like, why they got this dialogue in here? Because I love cutscenes, but I think they did a really good balance with dialogue. Having the voiceovers was a major plus. I think that was a win. And then having the cutscenes that they had, all the cutscenes that they had were very well produced.
Yeah, that was the important part there. I mean, you did do a full breakdown of the whole story, but what you're talking about there is actually something that not a lot of these games have. Usually you're reading text, and for those who are not that interested with the text, I mean, people skip cutscenes, never mind reading text. It can get like, oh, wow, it's too much. But yeah, the game did well with presentation for me, especially for this style of a game. They put a lot of effort into the cutscenes and a lot of effort into the storyline.
But if I had to say one thing, not to cut you off, but the one thing I will say that they probably failed on a little bit is that they didn't have any memorable soundtracks. Typically, when you have a game as powerful as this one, you usually will have some type of soundtrack that reminds you of that particular moment or particular game, right? Sonic had one. All the big titles always typically have one, whether it's a sound effect or something that brings you back to that, oh my God, that game, that amazing experience you had with this game, right? And I don't feel like they had enough, or they didn't have any like soundtrack particularly that stood out, that was like, oh my God, this is the, that when you hear it, you're like, oh, I know what this is, right? So they didn't have.
Yeah, I think just to counter that, not, maybe there isn't a memorable thing, but the sound, as far as just in general music for the tone of Persia, you remember this is all about Persia. We can't put rap battles in here. We can't put, whatever pop music to make it sound something, but they did a good job to keep it flowing and feel like you're in it. So you might have not noticed the music. You might have not noticed the tones because it was so flowing into immersion for me. It was just a flowing game. Like everything about the game was flowing. Outside of me getting killed by a boss or dying from platforming, I was immersed in this game deeply, from sound, visuals, all of it. Even just to touch on that for a second before we go here, because this has been a long review. But the for me, the amazing stuff that I loved was, just like it's a 2D platformer, right? But it had 3D elements. Enemies will pop up climbing towards, where your side of the bridge. They had more stuff like that was visually pleasing. Even though it's a 2D game, you have those elements that really gave it better life, in my opinion. So that's something I loved. If any last words as far as for somebody who's new, maybe, or somebody who's already played it, people who watch this most likely already played it because we're spoiled everything. What is your final thoughts here, Cloudy?
No, my final thoughts is that if you are looking for a title that you can kind of get lost in and is going to present some type of a challenge and that you can kind of sit back and relax and kind of do away with it, I will say that this game is a must, and it should be a must in your book. Like, and I'm calling it game of the year, and it's so early in the year, it's only January right now, but I believe in it that much because it's been a very long time since I put my hands on something that I was like, wow, like this thing blew me away, and I was very surprised because I was not expecting it, but I think it's worth it. And I think right now, even it coming out, I think how much is it now? $60. It's not even a full $70 game, so I think it's $60 for the game, and it's a must have. It's a must pick up for anybody. That's what I would say. That's my final words.
Yeah. I feel you. I think, like I said, in my opinion, it's top 5 easily. You have Metroid, you have Castlevania, you can throw Dead Cell in there. After that, we could start debating about what's the last ones in the mix. But I got this game in there. Absolutely a good time. Definitely a recommendation from both of us. If you watch this, feel free to come back. We're going to try to have just a weekly breakdown on different topics. Feel free to drop whatever topic you want to talk about in the comments. We'll definitely be making sure to continue these dialogues as we're going to be checking out new games throughout the year. All right. Y'all stay safe out there. Stay blessed. Peace.